We're so glad that you could join us. I'm actually just going to quick change our video around so everybody can see you well. First of all, let me quick clarify. So where are you calling in from, Deha?
So I'm calling from Tirana, Albania, from my house in Tirana, Albania, because we're all quarantined.
That's awesome. Is that actually a map? What is the map behind you? Is it of your hometown?
No, actually, it's just a random subway map.
Oh, I was like, it looks like a subway map. I'm not really sure. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, on the East Coast of the US, and I'm also in my home because of the quarantine. So what's the weather like there today, Dea?
Yeah, it's actually pretty cloudy, kind of a gloomy weather. On the other days, it's been quite sunny. It's we really wanted to get out, but we couldn't. So kind of lucky that kind of happy that it's a cloudy day, so we can just stay inside and stay warm.
Yeah, staying inside on a cloudy day, you can like just watch movies and bake stuff, and it feels less sad. It was sunny here before. I'm looking out my window and I heard the birds, so I know it's not raining, but I think it's just a little warm in here because I shut the window because it's kind of noisy on my street. So what have you been doing to pass the time? I know that, are you still doing schoolwork, or how's that working out for you?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of schoolwork now because we have to keep up with everything. Besides that, I've been dealing with Technovation and with all the teams that we have this year. Kind of got into some reading since I never usually have time for that anymore. And yeah, I've been also playing the piano.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I'm also a musician of 10 years.
Oh my goodness. What do you play classical, or do you play modern tunes, or what do you play?
I like to mix it up from time to time. I used to play a lot of classics, especially Beethoven. But now I like to do things that are more contemporary. So if I hear a song that has that piano bass on the background, then I just like to learn it and probably sing along, although my singing's not that good.
That's awesome. That's like, I would love to be able to do that. Are there any, can you share with us any songs or contemporary singers that you most recently have played along with, or?
I actually love the movie La La Land.
Yes.
So almost everything from the soundtrack of La La Land I really adore. I like to play City of Stars and Mia and Sebastian's theme. They're my two favorites.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Well, your family is very lucky to have you quarantined with them, because it would be nice to have somebody playing live music. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I used to play the flute when I was younger, and I started taking the piano, but I could never get down the two hand. Like, I'm really impressed by people who can play the melody and the rhythm, I guess, on the other hand. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's sometimes a bit challenging when you have very two different tempos that you have to keep up with, but you get used to it.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Well, that's a very productive use of your time. I see that we are 5 minutes into our hour, so I think we can do some formal introductions now for those of you who are joining us live now on YouTube. So again, my name is Kate, and I work for Technovation as the alumni lead and coordinator for alumni and student ambassadors. And we have with us our student ambassador, Dea Rojani, and she is our student ambassador. She is our superstar and finalist in our competition for JESA, her mobile app that I'm seeing a warning that my internet connection is unstable, so I apologize if I drop out right now. Sorry, Dea and her app that combated gender violence. And just to give a little background on Dea, so she had also won the grand prize last year in our competition, but she's also been a robot programmer on the Albanian national robotics team for 2 years, and she has traveled to the Olympics of robotics for those 2 years as well. And she also mentors at Robot Tech, an American Corner Tirana club, where children ages 10 to 14 learn the basics of programming and robotics. So we're very fortunate to have you on this call today, Dea, and also to have you as our student ambassador and mentor for so many girls. So we'd love to today share a little bit about, we know that everyone is in sort of unusual circumstances right now, with schools being shut down and regular activities being canceled. And so we wanted to try and help by live streaming conversations that could help continue developing skills and collaborative thinking and problem solving. So we wanted to ask Dea to share some of her tips on how to lead virtual sessions effectively. And then this Thursday, April 23rd, you can join us here again for learning how to build a virtual team and collaborate online. So I've talked a lot, so now I want to turn things over to Dea. Dea, what are some of the tools and activities that you found effective in working with your teams? And can you share a little bit about how you've, especially in this period of time, used them?
Yeah, so with our teams, now we like to use two main platforms for communicating with everyone and hosting our weekly sessions. So before the quarantine, we would meet up every Friday in two different time frames with all the teams at the American Corner Tirana spaces. So now, because of the quarantine, we normally cannot do that. So first, we thought of everything that we usually did during the normal meetings. So what structure our meetings had, and then found the platform that offered the features that actually were best fit for how we wanted to continue all these meetings that we had. So what we would usually do is do a little bit of icebreaking activities when you first get there, then go through the curriculum, some activities, and then split up the work into teams. So we found out that the best way to do this online was using Zoom, and especially for the breakout room feature that enabled us to split all the students into their teams and put them into different meetings, let's say sub-meetings. And us, the mentors, could move from room to room and talk with every team about the difficulties they had faced, tips on how to improve something, or if they had any questions. So we used Zoom once a week, every Friday. And the other platform that we recently started using is Google Classroom. Now, a lot of you might think Google Classroom, well, that's what we use for school, a lot of homework. Well, we've managed to keep it fun. We don't give out any homework there. We post a lot of helpful material though. And the whole purpose of this was it to become a community. So it's not just us mentors posting helpful material to the students, it's also the students using it as sort of a forum. So they post a question there, and everyone else that has maybe more experience or has already done that part of the submission, for example, what's a good video editing software? Someone posts a question over there, and anyone from the Technovation community, from our Technovation Albania community, can answer. So it's not just the feedback that they get from us, the mentors, but also their peers, their classmates, sort of.
Absolutely, that sounds amazing. Have you ever, so it sounds like there's a lot of different channels for communication and for engagement for the teams and the students. Have you ever run into a challenge where students they may speak up if they were in a live setting, but on that virtual setting, they're quieter, and how do you engage with them or pull them out of their shell, so to speak?
Well, at first it was a bit like that. So it's a bit hard to get used to not seeing everyone in the same room and not seeing people eye to eye. So what we did at first was just we every time we do a couple of icebreaking activities. So we like to ask the students. So what were some achievements you had this week? So some achievements in school, in STEM, something that you did with your app. And everyone wants to talk about that because those are fun things. It's not always about work. It's something nice that you want to share. And that's how we kind of, that's what we do to get everyone used to the whole webinar setting. And after that, it's just way easier. It takes maybe 1 week or two to get into the whole mood of it. But then it becomes pretty normal. So
that's really helpful to know. And sorry. That's really helpful to know. And I appreciate that. Yeah, it's sometimes there's just that disconnect, but it's great to hear that you've got different ways to get people to feel more comfortable. Definitely, I'm a big fan of icebreakers. So also one other quick thing I just wanted to ask you before I forget, you mentioned Google Classroom. Is that do you have to be do you have somebody who's a teacher who's able to access that, or can students and regular individuals who aren't official teachers create their own account with that?
Okay, so everyone can create an account, but us, the mentors, open a class and we sign up there as teachers. And then we can post assignments, materials, things like that. But everyone, there's actually a setting if you want to allow everyone to post on the wall, they call it. And we've enabled that option, so everyone can just post their question right up there on the wall, and everyone can comment to give solutions or tips.
Thank you. I was curious because I know that I've heard of it as a tool and it sounds really useful. So it's really good to know that there's an alternative that's more structured in some ways than Google Hangouts and all, which is also another awesome tool, but just, in case people need that more robust tool. So you mentioned the breakout rooms, using them as a way in Zoom to allow for smaller teams to have that time to interact with each other. Do you also find that with people who are collaborating online, are they able to use other collaborative tools like Google Docs, or, when they're working on a document and collaborating in real time, do people use that time to do that as well? Or is it more like they're video chatting and they're talking through their ideas, but then they go off and do their work separately? Have you noticed any difference in the way that work gets done versus all together at the same time around a table, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so we've recommended using everything that Google offers, so Google Slides, Google Docs, because everything's just on one drive, one repository, and it's things are way more organized, because passing a Word document around with all the changes, that can get very, very, very messy. And if you're able to make those changes real time via Google Docs, that's way more structured, organized. You leave the comments, return to a previous version of that document. And we've personally, from my experience in Technovation, we've used that even before we had this quarantine condition. It's a very helpful tool. And Zoom also has a lot of extension options, so you can connect Google Docs and other applications that you use. I think you can also connect Slack. So that's also a really cool feature. But Zoom also has a lot of cool features that we've found very helpful. So for example, if you go into a breakout room and someone is sharing their screen, you can request to remote control that screen. So if someone is not understanding something, or it's something with the code, maybe with the junior teams not always understanding what to do, it's way easier. You just request the remote control access and they have to approve it, and you can just sort of go into their computer. No, it's also, if it sounds really weird, but it's actually really effective, and it's way more, it's way easier than just telling people to install some remote control software, then getting the call from that, and simultaneously with a video call to connect with a remote control software. It gets pretty tricky. So Zoom offers that, and we found it very helpful. Also, it has the annotation options, so your screen can double as a whiteboard. It's got a bit of a learning curve, so you have to write on the computer with your hand. You actually have to draw what you have to write. It's a bit hard, but I guess with some work you can get used to it. So those are some of our favorite features.
That is really, you highlighted that being able to take remote control, so that you're saying that you can do coding coaching over the live meeting, correct? Or
yes. So
that's really cool.
If you've got MIT App Inventor opened and one of the students is not finding one of the blocks or not knowing how to connect one of the blocks. Just an example, you can remote control and your mouse will actually be moving in their screen. So it will move the things on their screen.
That is really awesome. Um, okay, a question for Dea in the chat. I'm not sure. So from Shrishti wants to know how Dea dealt with situations where there are several ideas of team members which are not similar with each other, like so moderating. Have you encountered a situation like that, Dea? And what was your take on that?
Yeah, so definitely through all 4 years that I've taken part in Technovation, of course, that you will always face dilemmas where you'll have to debate with your teammates. You will not always see eye to eye on things because we're all different. We're not the same people. We have different opinions, and that's why we're a team. And I know it sounds a bit scary at first to do all this teamwork thing. It can get difficult, but the important thing is that you are able to find compromise. So maybe always be open-minded to what one another has to say. So try to be as objective as possible with all the ideas that are shared. Try to weigh in the pros and cons maybe, and try to reach a compromise as a team.
Thank you. That's really great advice. And absolutely to your point that this is something that even pre-quarantine is something that teams might struggle with. It's anytime a group of people get together. So I appreciate that. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier, actually, and I'll keep an eye on the chat for additional questions, and folks feel free to type them in. Thank you for entering the ones that you have. Dea, you mentioned the whiteboard feature, and I was curious. I know in some meetings I've been in, you can put text or draw something freehand, as you mentioned, but what's the best use of a more, free form tool like that in terms of this type of work? Have you seen it? Are you saying that people would annotate a screen to show like, we need to look at this in a coding portion, or is it more like brainstorming, like creatively?
I guess that it would be really great to use it also for brainstorming, but since we haven't tried it actually for brainstorming since that we actually did that pre-quarantine. I guess that would also be really effective. But for now, a really useful way to take advantage of that feature would be maybe encoding by mentors when they're explaining something. If they want to highlight or make a little note beside the code, they can just annotate it, just as they would do on a normal whiteboard or blackboard or whatever you use in school. It's got a similar use.
That makes sense. Thank you. Sorry, just one other question I thought I saw in the chat. Oh, I see. Sharisa is saying that being open-minded helps solve the problem faster, and you can understand your other team members' opinions, which is very true. Dea, I wanted to ask you, have your team started developing their pitch videos yet? And if so, I know that, this season we're encountering, the barriers to access for things like video equipment or software, and just the barrier to creating such a team-oriented type product when we're all remote is really challenging. Have you found virtual ways of dealing with that, or what has your experience been so far with the teams?
Yeah, so most of our teams have actually started either writing the script or actually filming the pitch video. It's been a bit hard because some of them had imagined doing things more complicated, going out in the nature and things like that. But what we've done is we've looked through some previous year examples that were very simple videos. That was pretty helpful to look at them. They were just, for example, one person standing in a blank background with only one color, maybe. And we've just focused on the basics more to just always look at the camera, not use filler words, things like that. And we've also looked into the video editing softwares. It's a bit hard to find some that are for beginners completely and some that are free completely. But there are some really good options that you can access from your smartphone. For example, we have Splice, which is an app. It's all free, as I know, and it's also for Android and Apple devices. And that works pretty nicely. You also have iMovie, but just Splice has a few more features than iMovie. Um, some teams, I think, were recommending another one called Movie Maker. I'm not really sure that's an. I think it's called Movie Maker, and so far they've just started to brainstorm on some ideas to just feature some visuals in the pitch video, just to make it more creative, because it can get it's a bit hard to keep it interesting if you're just standing in front of a plain wall. But they're very optimistic, and I'm pretty sure that they will come up with creative ideas to keep it as interesting as possible.
That's awesome to hear, and I'm glad to hear that they're finding both ideas that work for them, restructuring storyboards. And I know it is disappointing, because I think that sometimes I know I definitely get tied to the way a story could be told. So to go with something different can be challenging. But I'm so glad that you guys are finding the creativity in that new path as well. And those recommendations for Splice, and was it Movie Maker you said?
Yes.
That's really cool. That's good to know, especially for both Android and Apple devices. Oh, and I'm seeing some recommendations in the chat this is for the meeting tools. Thanks. Harshit had said that you can use Microsoft Team app instead of Zoom. So that's very good to know. And so Shrishti had also said, what's your best video editing software other than Movie Maker? Dea? It sounded like.
Yeah, well, for me, I think I would really go with Splice. I don't really know Movie Maker. I just heard it from the Technovation teams. I've used Splice more because it's super easy to use. I'm not much of a video editor myself. It's got some pretty cool options, as you can add these frames with titles, you can add text, you can add some background music. It's music for free. You don't have to worry about copyright and things like that. So I found it really, really convenient that you can do all that just from your phone. You can choose the quality that you want to export it to, so it doesn't take forever to export or things like that. And it's really optimal for videos that are 3 to 5 minutes, just like the pitch video that's being asked for Technovation.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. That's good to know. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I just wanted to ask, so from what you said earlier, Dea, about how you'd recommend somebody getting started with collaborating with their peers online, it sounds like you're saying to look into what platform would match what you already were doing in person best, and then get those accounts as necessary, whether that's the Google platform or Zoom or Microsoft Team app, whatever, and then sort of take what you were doing in person and convert it to an online experience, and then see where there's that gap and bridge it by, like, for example, you were talking about the teams being able to talk to each other, so you had the breakout rooms. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that in terms of what someone should do who's starting from total scratch, has not collaborated online before?
Yeah, so maybe if it's your first time joining an online meeting, probably the first meeting should be something just that's more introductory to the platform that you're using. So one person in the team that can be more experienced can make this sort of chart with all the options and all the buttons, so you can get more familiarized with everything that you have there, and just don't stand stiff in front of the camera, and make it and enhance your virtual experience. So I guess that would be really helpful. And just choose a topic for every meeting. Don't just open a meeting without knowing what to do. Set a goal for each meeting, and after each meeting you should also I think that it's pretty effective to just make a recap. So maybe a Google Doc with all the notes, all the things that were discussed, all the things all the decisions that you took during this meeting, all the goals you have for your next meeting, just to keep that all the things that you've done organized, and maybe then keep all these documents on some platform like Slack, or you could just keep them on Drive, just to stay just to touch base with your progress and everything that you've done from one meeting to another. And it can be a bit hard because there's a lot of digital divide in some countries. So not everyone might have, let's say, laptops or a good computer or stable internet connection. But the positive part about all this, the online virtual meetings, is that it really is helpful with breaking all the distance barriers. So if you're a team, and all your teammates live across the city, so it's pretty far to meet up, then you don't waste any time. You just open up a virtual meeting and you can discuss things, and you can decide on what to do next. So one other thing that's really helpful, and it's really more of an advantage to what is happening right now, and how we're doing on these online meetings, is that these online meetings are not just being used now during quarantine. They were used a lot by a lot of other companies. So it's a work practice that has been used for many years. So actually learning how to use these tools at this age is really helpful, because you'll also know how to use them when you get a job, or work on a job project or other school projects. So they're really helpful. It's definitely a helpful experience.
You raised so many good points just now, Dea. You know, I was going to ask you about what are the benefits, because I always think of, or a lot of people might think of, moving from in-person meetings to online is what you lose. And I love how you highlighted, sure, there are some things you might lose, but what you gain in breaking down the distance barriers and the ability to meet in a unique way where, obviously recognizing the challenges for those of us who may not have great internet connection and whatnot. But apart from that, how we can really break down other there were barriers to meeting in person too. So I appreciate you saying that. And so many of the other things you said, I appreciate also, in terms of you raising what skills you're building by learning how to work virtually, because that's really true. Both pre-quarantine world and post-quarantine world, we're going to need these kinds of skills to, go to school, to work, to connect with our communities. So I appreciate you saying that. What would you say? I know you mentioned earlier some of the ways that you might get students or girls to feel comfortable meeting virtually. Do you ever just cut loose in your online meetings and have fun? And if so, how would you recommend doing that?
Yeah, totally. In fact, that's a really important part of meeting, and especially I would really suggest it to the teams when they have separate webinars. For example, only their team working one day a week. It's really easy to forget the balance between fun and work. And now that it's online, they might get too focused on work. And I remember that every time in Technovation, everything hasn't been entirely super serious. We've always had our fun, especially when we were shooting, for example, the pitch video, or when we were out just discussing about a certain feature of the app. And it's really important to keep doing that, just to bond more with your teammates, because by bonding more, you also learn how to deal with misunderstandings and how to find a better compromise. So my suggestion would be, don't always talk about work. I mean, I know there's a submission deadline and things like that, but you should also be having fun, because we should be learning and also enjoying all this process. So if you can, throw a virtual pizza party while discussing about your pitch video, or whatever is in hand, or just talk with your teammates. Ask how their week has been. Don't just talk about work.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. So I'm seeing a question from Sharisa about what programming software did you use, Dea?
Okay, so on my first and second year, I used MIT App Inventor because I had no idea how to code whatsoever. So I was completely new at this, and I just started with the tutorials on the Technovation page with the MIT App Inventor. And after the second year, I felt that I could go on another stage, so I started learning Java, and I used Android Studio with Java, and that's what I also used last year.
That's awesome. I love that yeah, the arc of learning. You try new things as you gain more knowledge. That's awesome. So I want to say, I think I do one last question, Dea. You know, well, first of all, let me ask you, is there anything else that you wanted to share on meeting virtually that we haven't covered? Because I know we've been through a lot of different topics, but just to make sure, is there anything else you wanted to share with the group?
Nope. I think we're all good from here.
Wonderful. And I'll just ask, so to your point about having fun online, what's been making you laugh lately? I feel like it's so great to be able to have a good time, in these days, and it's hard to maybe rely on what we used to rely on. So what's been keeping you amused these days?
Actually just FaceTiming with my friends. I really realize that I miss them now. Yeah, just talking with my friends mainly. They're my main source of amusement.
That's wonderful. I'm so glad. For me, it's animal videos on YouTube, but we each have our thing. Thank you so much, Dea, for sharing your experiences, your wisdom with us. Really appreciate it. And for sharing with all the folks on the call, and then for the folks who'll be watching the recording later. I know they appreciate your advice. So,
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Lovely. Our pleasure too. With that, this concludes the live stream, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.